This is the secret behind RGG Studio's game development. In 2025, Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza will finally be playable, and this game alone is already a stellar feat for Ryu Ga Gotoku Studio, considering that this Pirate Majima game will come out a year after the success of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. But the craziest part about this is that RGG Studio is already working on not just one, but two big projects, one of which is the much-awaited sequel for the founding father of 3D model fighting game, Virtua Fighters, and the other is seemingly their next biggest project since Infinite Wealth that takes place in 1915 Japan, that might tell the story of one of the most influential Yakuza family in history, which by the looks of it, this game will set another monumental record for Sega and RGG Studio. Now this is all well and good, but this also leaves me with a simple yet concerning question. How is Ryu Ga Gotoku Studio keeping up with this amount of workload to develop games that become massive hits one after the other in a single year? Granted, this is not a new thing for them. Ever since they rebranded from Sega's CS Research and Development No. 1 to the now more renowned Ryu Ga Gotoku Studio, they're able to average 2 new games on a yearly basis. And if we take a look at their history of games, from 2012 to 2024, there only had been 2 years where RGG Studio wasn't able to release a game, 2013 and 2022. But that's not because they got lazy. If we look closer, the years prior to that, they released more than 2 games. And that's how RGG Studio stays ahead in the gaming industry. To put that into perspective, other game studios aren't able to keep up with this kind of performance, such as CD Projekt Red with their Cyberpunk and upcoming Witcher 4. Game Freak had a long history of releasing at least one Pokemon title annually, but they also had years where they weren't able to release anything. Game Science and their Monkey, well, it might take them 2 years to develop their next project and maybe another 2 to prepare speech. Even From Software is not able to do this kind of hectic scheduled releases. Now, I am not saying that these developers are far less talented than RGG Studio, because their games are also amazing and a blast to play, especially FromSoft. It's just that RGG Studio is truly an abnormality when it comes to developing these games, but is still able to retain the same quality over and over again. Simply put, RGG Studio is in a league of its own, since this type of performance is seldomly seen in other devs. One of the ways a video game developer is able to release multiple titles a year is if they have multiple divisions, like Atlus with P Studio handling Persona, and Studio Zero now helming Metaphor Re Fantasio. The other is by simply being bigger and having the assets to develop more games, like Ubisoft or Bethesda. So how is RGG Studio able to develop multiple titles every year that are so good we can simply forget about this Yakuza mobile game? Well, Yokoyama-san had a theory as to why they are able to do this phenomenal consistency. According to him, they take on an approach that builds on the game's previous version. In other words, they reuse assets. And if you've watched my other videos before, we know already how much of a genius RGG Studio is when it comes to being resourceful. They would reuse assets for the locations like Kamurocho, Sotenbori, and now Hawaii with the upcoming Majima game. They even reuse the same animations, and oh boy, making 3D animations is quite tedious, especially for a studio that doesn't really depend much on motion capture. But reusing assets is not enough to develop games every year, considering other devs also reuse assets. Thankfully though, RGG Studio has their own unified engine that streamlines their process. They have developed and redefined the Dragon Engine over multiple iterations of the Yakuza games. The Dragon Engine saved the studio a lot of development time by allowing assets, mechanics, and tools to be reused while also improving it in each title. Just compare how Yakuza 6 looks from 2016 to 2024's Infinite Wealth. And frankly, I do prefer the Dragon Engine over their use of Unreal Engine 5. In other words, Yakuza games are developed on existing foundations and improving known mechanics and systems. Another vital point in Yokoyama-san's theory is that they develop games to be more like dramas or movies that follows the linear media content. Now, he's not referring to the games having a scheduled consumption like in cable TV. It's about their narrative formula, where every Yakuza title is dependent on past events. This is done even more efficiently because they retain the same writer with Yokoyama-san and his team. They understand the kind of tone and style that fits the setting of Yakuza. With this consistency, they're able to produce compelling stories and characters. Moreover, Yokoyama-san emphasized how they strictly follow their release schedule. And this is not a simple time management since other game studios obviously have their own set of scheduled objectives. RGG Studio doesn't focus on what the fans want or expect from them, because if they did, then we would have already seen the announcement for Yakuza Kiwami 3. We may had at last found Judgment 3, and this upcoming solo Majima game would have been released 5 years ago considering Majima shot up in popularity after Yakuza 0. Rather, they altered their schedule of releasing games between the mainline and spin-offs to avoid getting oversaturated while keeping the fan base engaged. So it wouldn't surprise me if RGG Studio already has a decade-long schedule for future titles. And who knows, maybe the other fan-requested games are there. This is why RGG Studio is also confident in saying that fans would be surprised in their next projects. And they were right. We would not expect that Majima will become a pirate. A new Virtua fighter isn't in anyone's bingo card. And you know, who would have thought that we needed something like Project Century before it was revealed? And even Snoop Dogg is involved, which also tells us that RGG Studio, despite sticking with their scheduled titles, also listens to their fans, since Snoop is one of the most requested celebrities to be put in the game. Now, having a rigid schedule isn't the only reason why RGG Studio is so good at balancing the quality and quantity of their games. It's their work environment. According to Yutaka Ito, Like a Dragon's technical director, they have around 40 to 50 programmers working on different areas of the game, sectioned in adventures, battle, minigames, and other important areas. This enabled the studio to have their own moving assembly line, pumping out the needed parts for the game. And because of this automation, they're able to release the title at the expected time, and sometimes even earlier, like what happened with Pirate Yakuza. The most critical effect of this is that their programmers are always delighted in seeing their names in the credits, especially for the rookies, because not only do they now have a developed game under their name for a short time, but there's already an upcoming game. Ito-san even said that last year's rookies had their names in the credits for 3 games in a single year. And if you were that rookie, you would be so motivated to work for the next game, which of course resulted to the low turnover rate for RGG Studio, thus allowing them to develop more games on a yearly basis. Now, the problem is, they are developing 2 new IPs that are wildly different from the Like a Dragon series. One is a fighting game, and the other won't be based on existing narratives from the Yakuza world. And by now, you know that RGG Studio will be able to do this, even if Virtua Fighter will be developed in, for example, Unreal Engine 5. RGG Studio already has experience working with it when they remade Like a Dragon Ishin, while also developing Like a Dragon Gaiden and Infinite Wealth on their own engine. So using 2 engines isn't even a problem for them. But how about Project Century? What if it uses an entirely different engine, maybe something like the upgraded version of their Dragon engine? That isn't even, again, going to be a problem for them. Considering in 2016, RGG released Yakuza Kiwami under their old engine, and then Yakuza 6, which is the first game to use the Dragon engine. RGG Studio is quite the abnormality, because of how they are able to develop multiple games every year, while each of them remains undoubtedly beautiful. And that's why there's no reason to panic for RGG Studio being burned out. I mean, I'm really excited for Project Century, and there's a lot of things that we don't know about it yet. Well, I have a video right here explaining what Project Century really is. If you're curious about that, then check this video out. Join Otaku Define for more Like a Dragon content. This is Mav, and Merry Christmas, Mikao Dice.